Hey guys, it's SportsDude13 here, and today I got another wacky bracket, but this time, this is going to be based off of who would win March Madness if it were to be based off of college football. So starting off, UConn would beat Stetson in football, just because, well, I've never really heard of Stetson having a football program, to be honest. And UConn does have a football program, but they're just not that good in football, so UConn just moves on there just because I think they would beat Stetson in football if Stetson were to have a football program. And then Florida Atlantic and Northwestern. I think Northwestern would beat Florida Atlantic if they were to match up with each other in football. And then San Diego State and UAB. There was at some point for a few years UAB shut down their football program, but at least they started operations on their football program again a couple years back. But I think San Diego State would beat UAB if they were to match up with each other in football. And then, of course, Auburn would destroy Yale in football. It was pretty obvious. And then BYU would obviously beat Duquesne in football. I never really heard of Duquesne having a football program. Yeah, Illinois would beat Morehead State. I've never really heard of Morehead State having a football program. And then this one's obvious. Never really heard of Drake having a football program, so Washington State takes that one. And then for this one, Iowa State would beat South Dakota State if they were to play against each other in football. Although South Dakota State too has a good football program, but I think Iowa State would win against them if they were to match up with each other. Going down the list, North Carolina would beat either Howard or Wagner in football. And then in this one, Mississippi State would beat Michigan State in football. And then we have, this is a tough one. I don't know who would win against in a game of football between these two. I'm gonna have to look up those two programs, so I'll be right back. So, after researching, I have found out that St. Mary's used to have a football program from 1892 to 2003. And for Grand Canyon, I actually found out that they do not have a football program, and they've never even had one, ever. So, because of that, St. Mary's moves on, even though, despite the fact that they used to have a football program and that Grand Canyon doesn't have one, never has had one in their history. So that's why St. Mary's moves on, even though they used to have a football program, but not anymore. So pretty interesting information there. And then, yep, Bama would destroy any no-name school in football. And then Clemson would beat New Mexico in football. Baylor would obviously beat Colgate if they played against each other in football. I think Nevada would beat Dayton in football. I never really heard of Dayton having a football program. And then this one here, Arizona would beat Long Beach State in football. Going back up to the south, Houston would beat Longwood in football. Never really heard of Longwood having a football program. And this one, I think Texas A&M would beat Nebraska in football. And then right here, Wisconsin would beat James Madison in football. And then in this one, Duke would beat Vermont in football. Vermont actually used to have a football program, but not anymore. And then in this one, Texas Tech would beat NC State in football, in my opinion. And then this one's obvious. Kentucky would beat Oakland in football. And then this one here, Boise State's really good football program. And then Colorado, they have Deion Sanders as their coach. But I think Florida would beat both Boise State or Colorado if they were to match up against each other in football. And then this one, oh man, I don't know who would win against these two in a game of football. I'll have to do some research again, so I'll be right back. Alright, so after researching, Western Kentucky actually does have a football program, and Marquette does not. Well, Marquette actually used to have a football program, but it was called the Golden Avalanche instead of the Golden Eagles. And they used to have one back then, Marquette, but not anymore. And Western Kentucky currently has a football program, so because of that, Western Kentucky moves on. Now, onto this region. Purdue would beat either Montana State or Grambling if they were to match up with each other in football. And then in this one, TCU would beat Utah State in football, in my opinion. And then this next one here, Gonzaga actually used to have a football program, but I don't know about McNeese. I'm going to research McNeese real quick, so I'll be right back. After looking up if McNeese had a football program or not, I actually found out that they do have a football program and they're currently playing. And I already know that Gonzaga used to have a football program, but not anymore. So because of that, McNeese moves on. Because of that. And then, Kansas would beat Samford in football. They were to match up with each other. And then in this one, Oregon would beat South Carolina in football. And then this one, I've found out that Creighton used to have a football program, but not anymore. And Akron does have a football program, so Akron would move on there. And then in this one, Texas would beat either Virginia or Colorado State if they were to match up with football. Because Texas is really good, is doing good in football recently. And then this one, Tennessee would beat St. Peter's in football. I never really heard of St. Peter's having a football program. Okay, going up to the second round here. I think Northwestern would beat UConn in football because UConn isn't really good at football, in my opinion. Because every time I see or hear about UConn in football, it's just like they're not that good. And then here, Auburn would beat San Diego State in football. BYU would beat Illinois in football. And then right here, I think Iowa State would beat Washington State in football. And over here, Mississippi State, I think Mississippi State would beat North Carolina in football. And that one is just obvious, Alabama. Would just destroy St. Mary's in football, though St. Mary's used a football program, but not anymore. And then, of course, Clemson. And then for this one, Arizona, I think, would beat Nevada in football. Going up here, Texas A&M, in my opinion, would beat Houston in football. And then in this one here, I think Wisconsin would beat Duke in football. Over here, I think Texas Tech would beat Kentucky if they were to match up with them in football. And then over here, Florida would beat Western Kentucky in football. In this one, I think TCU gets the edge over Purdue in a football game. I think Kansas would beat McNeese in football. I mean, Kansas has been doing good in football recently. And then Oregon would totally destroy Akron in football. And then this one, this is a tough one. These two are pretty good football programs, Tennessee and Texas. I think Texas would beat Tennessee in football. That's how I see it going in this football bracket. So we go on to these Sweet 16 games now for the football bracket. Auburn would beat Northwestern. And I think BYU would beat Iowa State. And then course, SEC matchup, Mississippi State and Alabama. Of course, Bama. They own Mississippi State in football. And then, of course, Clemson beats Arizona there. And then, I think Wisconsin would beat Texas A&M in football. And then this one, Florida would beat Texas Tech in football. I think Kansas would beat TCU in football. I mean, Kansas has been doing good in football recently. And then in this one, I think Texas would beat Oregon in football. Alright, let's stay down here for a moment. Bama would beat Clemson in football, although it would go either way because Clemson's also a pretty good football program. And Texas would beat Kansas in football. And then right up here, I think Auburn would beat BYU in football. And then over here, Florida would beat Wisconsin in a game of football. So here we go, the final four, if it were to be based off of football, of how it would play out. We got an Iron Bowl, Auburn and Alabama in the final four. And it would be Alabama taking it. And then on the other side, Florida, Texas. I think Texas would beat Florida in football. Texas is currently better than Florida in football. And then in the final, Alabama, Texas in the football bracket, it would be Alabama winning it all in the football bracket. And out of all these teams that made it into the March Madness tournament this year, Alabama would dominate everybody if it were to be based off of football. So that's my football bracket. So stay tuned for more wacky brackets that I'll do. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to join the Sports Dude Nation. And I'll see you guys later.